I want to remind us all of the wise words of Chimamanda Ngozi. Chimamanda Ngozi. Chimamanda is a Nigerian writer. She holds a PhD. And she's a household name for people like us who are just in awe of how she writes. When I went to look for writers in the competition, I bore in mind what she said. Her famous words. She says, writers need to read. You could tell from reading someone's story how well read they are. African writers must strive to change the narrative by introducing indigenous characters and local themes into stories. And it's relevant because our literature in the subcontinent should celebrate the way we live. Literature is an extension of our traditions.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I do hope that whatever you've been up to today, that it's been productive. I'm going to try and do an oral review of Americanah, the 2013 novel by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I have decided to do an oral review, ladies and gents, because if I was to post it on the page, due to the fact there is a maximum number of characters that you're allowed to post on Facebook, it would have had to be done in parts. And so when I tried to do it, I thought, to be fair to people, I should do an oral review so that you can take your time to watch the video or listen to it. So you can gain some information if you're an English literature student, you teach English, or you maybe are doing creative writing. I am aware that some of you that are on the page are here because you want to enrich your knowledge, and it may very well be that this is one of the books that is on your syllabus. I don't know, someone like yourself, Emerson, who I'm going to tag in the video, I don't know whether you are going to study Chimamanda's books, or someone like Stanley Tijoki. I don't know whether it's going to be relevant to what you do in Nigeria, but I'm pretty sure that the way things are going, Chimamanda's books, they have been so highly commended. There's going to come a time in your life when you would need to reference it, even if you were just talking about it. So, as you'd expect, I'm going to do a review, and it's going to be along the lines of what the themes are. Thematic analysis, characterization from a literary perspective, plot, the sequence of events through which the story is told, setting, and the genre. I'll start over the genre. I have already said it's literary fiction. Literary fiction or woman's fiction. I should have said women's fiction, shouldn't I? So literary fiction would be that someone has done English literature, they've done English language. Someone like Chimamanda, she's done a PhD in English, and she is going to use her characters, her protagonists, to embody a theme. How she's going to do it is she's going to make sure what the characters think and how the characters speak and how the characters behave, that is going to supersede the plot or the sequence of events. So by and large, the story in Americanah is told through what Ifemulo, it's an Igbo name. Ifemulo thinks about other people. It's very much what Ifemulo or Binze and Auntie Ujo think about people. That's how the story is told. So that's where you'd find a literary perspective. But basically what Chimamanda's doing is she's going to bring in very, very big themes. She's going to bring in big themes like race, identity, sexualization of women, the political atmosphere in Nigeria from post-colonial days to present. She's going to do that, but how she's going to do it is going to let Ifemulo and Obinze and Auntie Uju have experiences or say things through the the interactions with others. And that way the reader is going to then be faced with these very big themes. And it's a very cleverly written book. It's probably about the best books I've read in my life after Things Fall Apart. So basically, the way she's tackled it, she's done it so well that she was highly commended by New York Times, excuse me, I've got a cold, and The Guardian here as well. So, plot. The story starts off in Princeton. It's summer, summer's a beautiful time of the year. We have young Ifemelu, who's going to have her hair done. Ifemelu had just shut down her blog, B-L-O-G. She just finished doing a blog, and she's going to have her hair done. And straight away she starts depicting West African hairdressers who have migrated to America. And she keeps going back and forth, referring to her relationship which she'd had. And we haven't met her boyfriend yet, but we know she's just finished their relationship. And we know she's going to go to Trenton to braid her hair. And we know that Trenton is not as upmarket as where Ifemelu lived in Princeton. And then we find that she goes to this shop where she meets these African hairdressers, mostly from Senegal. They can't really speak English. Straight away she starts depicting them. Excuse me, my nose is quite blocked. And this depiction is not very flattering, but that's the way Chimamanda writes, and she writes tongue-in-cheek. And we're presented with people who have migrated. They want to tap into the American dream, but sadly for them, they find themselves working in an urban area where the shop that they're working out of is so dirty, it's dilapidated, it's unkempt, it's untidy. And the only way these ladies can make money for themselves in America is by braiding hair. And they braid hair for hours on end. And you can see their fatigue. But then when they have made money, they send it back through Western Union to the countries of origin. And this is how Chimamanda starts opening up the life of migrants. We're going to move on to see how migration is a massive theme in the book. It's a huge theme. I mentioned race and identity, but migration is also a theme, as well as love. We'll come back to that. So we start seeing how a lot of African migrants come to America, come to England with a perception of what life is going to be like. And if, unfortunately, they're not able to make it, like the 1% of people that do, that end up, doing very well for themselves, you have to do jobs to get by. And most of what they find themselves doing are like hairdressing. And one of the girls in the hairdressers, her boyfriend was a Nigerian man. He was an Igbo man. He was a taxi driver. And so we start seeing where migrants are placed in American society. And Chimamanda very cleverly tells us the hierarchy of black ethnic people in America. So you might have African Americans, then you have those who've arrived, and very much down at the bottom of the ladder under other ethnicities. And she also says that at the top of the pinnacle in American society is white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Under them you have Jewish people, and then you have people who you might refer to as Hispanic, and then you have African Americans, and at the bottom you have black migrants. So, the story then follows Ifemelu. It goes back and forth. It doesn't go in a linear progression, in a chronological order. So it goes forward and it comes back when Chimamanda wants us to reiterate something. We go back to something that happened, maybe even happened in Nigeria. And so it's not told in a chronological order. And that's another characteristic that you might find in literary fiction. So in the second chapter, we then face with Obinze. Obinze has sent Ifemelu an email. One other sub-theme in the book is the use of the internet, how the internet connects people. So Ifemelu, who is in America, she's sending emails to Obinze, and it just lifts the profile of Nigeria, that people are able to communicate electronically as well. Because one of the things that Chimamanda aims to do in the book is to tell another story. She tells a narrative that's quite different from what you might find in classical novels. So you have that's written here by maybe the Charlotte Brontes and Shakespearean books, or in like the Fitzgeralds in America, for example, classic American literature, if you've done literature like we have. So what Chimamanda wanted to do was to raise the profile of the story that Africans tell. So she very cleverly does it by showing how the internet connects people with those back home. And she also shows how Western Union is used to facilitate the transfer of funds. So we then met Obinze, who was Ifeolu's first boyfriend. They met when they were at secondary school, and their relationship it was consummated while they were at university. And they both come from Christian homes. And again, what Chimamanda does is she critiques Christianity in a very good way, where what Obinze's mom expects of Obinze is not what Obinze does. He goes and have a girlfriend, and even though Ifemele is introduced to Obinze's mom, they do have premarital sex. So it's a lot of the way Chimamanda writes. She's quite sarcastic with it. So we're then again in America, and then we meet a lot of people through the blog that I'm flipping the pages again, that Ifemelu writes. The blog is a central part to the story, because through it she caricatures the American people that she meets. The young professional, the racist, the left-wing American, the foodie. There are a lot of foodies in America. A lot of people won't eat things that got gluten in it. They will only eat low-fat foods and what have you. And then we transported back to Nigeria, and we go back to when Ifemelu and Ibinze were children. And Ibinze talks about when he was growing up, and we then meet also their teenage friends, and through that we see a depiction of the socio-economic life in Nigeria back in the 1990s. The story basically takes place in America, Nigeria, England, and it finishes off back again in Igbo country, in Nigeria. So the story starts off in Princeton in America. We then go to England, and we come back to Nigeria. So how does that happen? Whereas Ifemelu stays in America, her teenage boyfriend, who she then loses touch with, Obinze, goes to England. He goes on a 6-monthly visa, which is meant to be for his mom, but his mom listed him as her assistant. So when Obinze's visa expires, Obinze stays in England as an illegal immigrant. So through Obinze's eyes that we go to England, and then Obinze goes back to Nigeria. Lo and behold, Ifemelu goes back to Nigeria, and that's how the story finishes. So that was the plot. The plot is told in a semi-linear way. It's laid out in a semi-linear way. I want to spend a lot of time looking at the themes. One of the themes which I should have started off with is the issue of long-distance relationships. So at the end of the day, it's a woman's fiction, although it's written in a literary manner. Basically, women's fiction would have romance, wouldn't it? A lot of it, things to do with women, our feelings, our emotions, who's she with, who's a boyfriend. And basically, the theme of love cannot be ignored, because at the end of the day, it's a romance fiction. The relationship with other people in the story is actually influenced by the love that Ifemelu had for Obinze. Ifemelu has different boyfriends in the story. She has Blake, an American guy who she describes as extremely attractive. Then she has a fling with a tennis coach who she didn't like. And then she has a relationship with a white bloke called Kurt, a very rich American geezer who, through the relationship with Kurt, Americanah is looking at those African women who have relationships with basically rich white geezers. And Kurt gives a lot of material things to Ifemelo. He takes her on holiday. She has to, even though she has a visa because obviously she wasn't an American citizen then, he takes her on holiday and he spends a lot of money on her. But Ifemelo still had feelings for Obinze, even though they weren't communicating. So she dates Blake, Kurt, and she has other sexual encounters with a man, and then she eventually goes back to Nigeria to be with Obinze. So it's a very, very, very liberal novel. If you're not as liberal as Chimamanda, just be one. That's a very liberal novel, and she presents the African woman as almost different to the way that we're perceived of, and she makes the contemporary African woman very, very lifelike and very attractive. So another theme that comes up is identity. When Ifemelo moves to America, it's the first time she gets to know. It's the first time she gets to know she's actually black. It's actually she gets to realise what being black is. So she is also now conflicted because whereas in Nigeria she was a upper middle class person, to think of the sort of education she had. She was a university student, her parents were very middle class, her dad was educated, her mom had a good job. And then Obinze's mom was a university lecturer and Obinze was a boyfriend. Then she goes to America and she finds herself at the bottom of the ladder, of society's ladder. Then she realised she's dark skinned. And then she realised that in America, there are certain people that are depicted as attractive. And then, her hair fell out. And so she has to cut her hair. And then she has very low cut hair. And then she ends up with an afro. And all of these things is just how Chimamanda's looking at the depiction of beauty. And now, like, as an African woman, though she's skinny, she's got a nice figure, she's come to America and basically hair is a massive thing. And we started with Ifemelo trying to braid her hair. Ifemelo worries a lot about her hair. And it's just, I worry about my hair, don't know about yourself. And I like how Chimamanda has explored it and how she's looked at how you affect our identity. So skin colour, hair, weight gain, and Ifemelo then became aware of people that were fat and people that were skinny. So like when she went into poor neighborhoods like Trenton, where there were a lot of migrants, she noticed how fat they were. When she went to Princeton, she noticed how skinny people were. And in her blog, Ifemelo talks a lot about hair, about identity, about race, and through things like that, we are confronted with bigger issues. We're also thrown into Nigerian politics from the get-go. And one of the ways that happens is through Auntie Ujo, who dates a military general. And he was then suspected of plotting another coup by the government. And so he dies in a quite suspicious aeroplane crash. But about that time, Auntie Ujo was already expecting Dyke, her child. And then the general's family came around and, they were so cool to Auntie Ujo. He was actually his side chick. And she somehow has to flee and she comes to America. And there's also a lot of other ripple effects of the sort of governments that they had in Nigeria from 1990s to 2013, where a lot of people weren't happy with their jobs. Like the university lecturers were on strike. Ifemelo's dad loses his job because he wouldn't call his boss, who was a lady, madam. He wouldn't call her ma. Things like that. But fact is there's a lot of jobs insecurity in Nigeria. And then we also face with political corruption where, it's who you know. It's who you know in the oil trade, to get you ahead. And it's who you know in the government to get you the sort of connections that you need to, to get into, the property trade and stuff like that. So, pardon me. So the book also explores political corruption in Nigeria and just the social malaise where the cost of living was rising. If Milo's parents were renting and at some point they couldn't afford to pay their rent, and the landlord used to come around and curse at them. And alongside that, it was the booming trade in oil by Igbo people. And then it's ridiculous because the Igbo people and the way they display their wealth, they're very flashy, aren't they? And if Femela makes a lot of ridicule of the way like rich Igbo people present themselves, but she's trying to get us to think that these people are they intelligent even, and a lot of them use pidgin English and try to talk themselves up. But when they then the way they speak with Infidem and Obinza, when they're trying to speak proper English, they don't do it properly. So I find that quite humorous. So her depiction of Igbo people is actually quite funny. They're quite driven, the Igbo. And she does it through like bringing in Igbo proverbs. And this is another way that Chimamanda lifts the profile of African languages. There are sections in the book where we read in Igbo proverbs, and she hasn't always translated them into English. And then the sections in the book that we read people speaking in Nigerian pidgin. And it's a way of lifting the profile of African languages, and Chimamanda's done it very well. By and large, it's the story of how Ifeanyi grows as a young woman. She grows to maturity. So she then, in America, she eventually gets a stay. She gets it because she writes a blog. This blog becomes very popular. She gets invited to give lectures about race. And then she makes a lot of money for herself. She buys a condominium. So she's arrived. And then because she's working with this magazine, she's writing a blog, they help her get a stay as an American citizen. But she did struggle. Before she eventually got here, there was a time when she was so depressed that she was getting out of bed because she had no money. And that was the time when she went and slept with the tennis coach. So, migration is a theme. How, in pursuit of a better life, when you arrive there, you find out the grass isn't always greener. Migration is also embodied in Obinze. Obinze outstays his visa in England, and he has to hide. And it's funny how Obinze is standing at train stations waiting for people to come and speak to him speak to him secretly so that he could use the NI number. And when Obinze then gets a job as loading and offloading furniture, one day he forgot what his real name was. And because Obinze wasn't giving the guy enough money to use his NI number as some another Nigerian migrant, he got reported to the authorities. And so Obinze was arrested and he was taken to Dover. Now, Dover is a migrant centre here in the UK, and illegal migrants are often held there temporarily before they're deported. And so Obinze, out of the friends who were migrants coming to visit him, eventually he was deported back to Nigeria, to Lagos. And when he arrives at Lagos, he just shows you what African societies are like. The policemen that were processing him go, "Oh, have you got anything for us?" Even then, they were looking for bribery. He just got laughed. The geezer has been deported, and they were looking for him to give them £10. Anyway, so migration is a theme that runs all throughout the story. I wanted to say there are different types of migrants as well that we meet. So in America, we have people from other African countries who, when they arrive in America, they want to change their accents, they want to change their look, they want to become quite westernized, and then they wouldn't want to eat the food that they're raised on. And then you come to England, meet some Nigerians who've migrated, who all of a sudden now they've made a bit of money, they want to buy paintings, they want to speak Nigerian pidgin. They're married to white ladies. And the way Chimamanda presents people, you got to laugh. And if Femelu is saying, look at this person, so and so, when they lived in Nigeria, they couldn't even speak properly. They never read books. They were homophobic. Now they come to England, their best friend is gay. And it just shows you how people change and how migrants, when they come to England or America, they sort of assume a new persona. They reinvent themselves. And all throughout the book, we have migrants trying to reinvent themselves, sometimes unsuccessfully. So I've looked at job insecurity. I've said migration is a theme. I said love. Politics also is something you can't ignore. Political corruption, especially corruption in the oil trade, the sort of dynamics in the property industry, evil people. And then when Ifemela comes back to Nigeria, she finds them in Lagos. There's a power cut, as you'd expect. People have generators. She's come from America back to Lagos, and she's confronted with the harsh realities of what life's like in Lagos. But however, it's a city that's going through a change, and it's a city that people are trying to rejuvenate. So we call it gentrification. So she now finds that someone like Obinze is now in the property market. Some of the people that she went to school with, they're ready for themselves. They've come up in the world a little bit. But, she finds it hard to relate to those people because obviously their perception of you changes when you live in America for a little bit. And, they expected her to acquire an accent. And one of the things, if you remember, didn't have was an accent. She retained her Nigerian accent. Okay, I want to talk also about the way the book looks at Barack Obama. So what happens is that when Chimamanda was dating Blake, the very handsome African-American man, it was around the time that Barack Obama was campaigning for presidency. And one of the things that unites Ifemela, Blake, Virginia, and all their friends, and because Blake was a university lecturer as well, blimey, Blake was a university professor. One of the things that unites them as liberal Americans was that Barack Obama won. And so the American dream, is told through Barack Obama, how, a half Kenyan gentleman with American citizenship became the president of America. I was also going to look at setting. I've said a bit about it. It's not set in one country, one continent. In fact, we are spanned through 3 continents. I want to also bring in language quickly because I can't talk about a book without talking about language. Some literary styles are employed, a lot of alliteration. And so you will see that Chimamanda repeats consonants and assonants as well, and then vowels. Sometimes she also uses a lot of hyperbole. And the way she writes, she tries, in my humble opinion, to copy the way Chinua Achebe writes, with a bit of, sarcasm. So, the rich sarcasm and that you find with Chinua Achebe is very much depicted in this novel. And, oh goodness. Chimamanda has a very, very, very good command of English, where this is one of the things that made the book so successful, that each chapter is fresh. So, she employs wit, humour, sarcasm. Obviously, when you're describing language, that's what you're going to say. Is it witty? Is it humorous? Is it dense? Is it sarcastic? Does she use literary styles? Yes, she does. She does use literary styles. I've mentioned alliteration, assonance, hyperbole, satire. The climax of the plot is Dyke's suicide. Dyke is Auntie Euge's son. Auntie Euge's come to America. She's not the best of moms, excuse me, though she loves Dyke. The problem with is that she wants to raise him in a way that's different to the way Dyke wants to live, being born in America. He's an American citizen, he's not Nigerian. And basically, Dyke is growing up in a white neighborhood where he's so conscious of his black skin. I don't think he quite felt like he could fit in at all. He overdoses on medication, but luckily his stomach is pumped and he survives. So yeah, the climax of the story is Dyke's suicide. And when Ifeanyi goes back to Lagos, what she does is she invites Dyke to come over for holiday so Dyke can see where his roots are from. The story ends with Obinze and Ifeanyi rekindling their relationship. However, Obinze was married. Obinze, when Ifeanyi comes back to Nigeria, he's already married, and he's got a very attractive lady, Igbo lady, he's married to, and he's got a child. He leaves them to be with Ifeanyi. Ladies and gentlemen, I do hope you enjoy that review.